Well, it's the last day of the year, 2022, and it was roughly a year ago that I did a tour of the garden, and I thought I would give you a little update report and also just share that gardens aren't always perfect, gorgeous and magazine worthy. Mine certainly isn't, and that also to remember that when you're only 2 or 3 years into a garden, it's not all going to be mature and lovely, and that's really okay. So I thought I'd start here at the front of the house. I'm going to spin around in a minute and show you some of the things that have changed. So I guess the main thing that you can see here is the dog, the new electricity box because we're having a lot of work done on the street, and my new gate pillars in the traditional vernacular style. Now these weren't here before because my boundary is actually where that tarmac is. That's all being lifted up this year, and I will have a very simple rustic set of traditional, again vernacular gates put here eventually. And the other thing I've done, you can't really see, but by the wheelbarrow you can see there's a hydrangea there. I've planted 3 Acer campestri as babies because that is basically gravel and grit. It's a very old drive here. And those Acer campestri I'm going to train as high as the wall, and then I'm going to pollard them every 3 or 5 years, and that will just block out a little bit my neighbour who is there and make this wall slightly more pleasant. Now the house, you can see a lot of work's been happening here because of the new electricity cables. So the border is looking a little bit sorry for itself. Nothing's been weeded yet. I've been so busy doing other things, but you can see the porch I had made is really taking shape. The door, this is a 2023 plan. The door's got to be taken off and be remade so that the boards don't overlap, which will be nicer. And up here, I rarely show you this awful skylight's being taken out, and a more traditional one in that shape is going to go there. And then hopefully next year all of this cement will come off and this will be lime plastered and it will look much better. Anyway, we will carry on going up the drive. This part of the house is slightly terrifying at the moment because, as you can see, the beam that holds these awful doors on is collapsing, and hopefully in January this is all going to be removed and a little timber framed oak kind of porch will go there, which will support all of the weight above, and it will be infilled with traditional clay and lime. So that's all going to change, and then all of the plants that are here will do much better. I've had another pillar fitted here and a little bit of traditional fencing there, and across the front at the moment it's all very temporary. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen, but what I've done along here is planted 2 Paulownia tomentosa. You can see one there and there's a smaller one further up, and again those are going to be pollarded in the same way to help give some vertical privacy, and they will make, when pollarded, foliage which is like a dinner plate size. And at the very end I've planted a tulip tree, Liriodendron, which will eventually replace that horrible conifer which I don't really like. Now this part of the garden is in absolute chaos, and some of my plans here include a new kind of open oak frame gazebo here which will replace the metalwork, which will give a kind of winter store and also shade in the summer, because here we have -10 in winter and +40 sometimes in summer, so we're really battling the odds. And the liquid amber which I planted a year ago has really suffered and not done a great deal. Now I'll start on this side. You'll see here that the windows have all been repaired. The one in the upstairs is done, and this side, a whole new window had to be put in there, which meant all of this border was dug up. But the great thing about that was we also removed an old soil-based floor, which is this pile here. I'll show you this actually. And this stuff, this traditional medieval infill, is what's going to be the reason to make the sorry, it's very windy. To make the infill around the structure on the other side. You will see I planted a new green gauge here because this one is on its way out, and the roof is waiting to be replaced, which is another 2023 ambition. This bit of the garden actually doesn't look too bad apart from the plastics coming up from the gravel, so I might just take that up completely because it's a nightmare and it's a bit tedious. These borders are okay. They're a little bit choked at the moment with forget-me-nots, and I haven't done any cutting back. And you can see there's bricks and bits and bobs from the works that have been going on in the house. So this is all to be cleared as soon as it's slightly dry. You can see it's really wet and horrible. The potager here is an absolute job and a half. So This line, this tree that's just here and the other tree here will eventually be espalier to give a sense of enclosure. At the end here there's an Australia behind that pot which is only a couple of years old, so that should fill out really nicely. Yeah, so in the potager, what's happening, last year I made these wooden edges, which was really much better. They're recycled from the old barn there when I knocked part of that down, and now all of these old bits of brick I'm collecting to dig up this earth path and replace it with brick, because in winter makes it easier to move around. This is my Malvern, if you remember the striped pear, that's my tree from Frank P. Matthews. That came this winter, so that's been planted. Here, it's not been that much of a success, and this side next year I'm just starting now laying bits of decaying wood to make a permaculture bed and see how that works as a thing. The barn's so ugly, but there's just no money to do anything about it, so I'm growing clematis up it, ivy and all sorts, in the hope of getting that to be covered a bit, and all of this wood has got to be taken away. And here I'm going to make raised wooden beds that can have glass roofs for early growing of seeds and things, because I can't really have a greenhouse. This wood's all got to go, and this dry branch hedge is going to be replaced with an actual hedge eventually. Now, of course, with new gardens you always inherit things you don't really want. Well, here's one thing I inherited: the blue lined swimming pool, which I cut down in half, and I'm now using, as I get it, bits of hessian to cover the liner and then planting around the edges. And this was all new planting, which is now completely covered in weeds. Also, with new houses you always get neighbours you don't want to see, so I've planted a hedge all along there in the hope that that will all be covered in, and trees is another layer to help just remove some of the skyline of other people's roofs so it looks more appealing. And I've got to do something about my neighbour's varnishing of the structure of the fence. I sold him that bit of land because you can see his house and my house are actually one building, so I had to sell him that bit of land, but I didn't quite anticipate he'd use such a horrible brown wood, so that's got to be somehow reduced in its offensiveness basically. Now, on this side of the garden, you can see the border is not looking that good. The roof isn't finished on the barn, it does leak. Here, I've planted like a C-shape of hornbeam, which is going to be a stilted hedge to help stop some of the wind in winter from the field, but allow me still to look through, because I quite like looking at the field, even though I'm not quite sure what to do with some of it. Here, a whole range of bits of rubble and building material from stuff going on in the house. Still lots of bits of wood from where the barn, I chopped it down. Now the barn used to come all the way to this piece of concrete, and now it doesn't, and that's planted, and that bit, once it's finished, is supposed to be like a slightly nice like little sheltered area. All of the additional rubble is being put here, and that will be concreted over eventually. Well, actually it's going to be lime and sand over eventually to make a terrace at the back when all that's gone, and to make a path up to the chickens, who quite happily living in their little igloo there. And this area under the apple tree will be a border eventually. What I'm also hoping to do is get rid of that gate. That's an ambition for 2023, and to get the brambles out of this old boundary line, because there are lots of stalled willows along here, and it would be nicer for them to flourish a bit, and I would quite like not to see my neighbour, and that would be handy. And then on the other side of the garden is really just about making sure that the weeds are out and stuff's growing. But you can see, and I really just wanted to show you this, you can see that the garden is looking a little bit worse for wear. Of course, I wasn't here in May and June last year, and then it was really, really hot and we had a hose pipe ban, and now it's really, really wet. But over the course of January, February and March, like everybody else, be out in the garden doing stuff, getting on top of it, and it will all start looking a lot better and a lot more like a garden. But if your garden's looking like mine, then don't stress, because it's perfectly normal, it's perfectly acceptable. And my main ambitions for my garden in this coming year are these big projects of these 2 or 3 oak structures and making structural planting so important in a new garden. Structural planting that shelters from wind, obscures views that you don't like, frames views that you really do want, and allows the character of the garden to build. But as I say, this is going to be its third year and everything is still quite young, and Nessa and I are still very much in the throes of deciding as we go. And of course, making a garden where you're trying to recycle and reuse materials does make that process slightly more long. Anyway, I hope you have a great gardening year ahead, and if you want to tell me about your plans, please do.